I died in a white room, screaming for the man who said he loved me, only to watch him walk away with silence in his eyes. 3 years later, I opened my eyes in a hospital bed, back before it all began. This time I won't waste my second life chasing the man who buried me. Because the one who truly loved me was the one I never saw coming. The sharp scent of disinfectant filled my nose before I even opened my eyes. Clean, cold, clinical. Everything felt too white. The bed beneath me was too stiff. The light behind my eyelids too bright. And the silence, the kind that rings, was unnatural. It didn't feel like waking up from sleep. It felt like surfacing from drowning. My head pounded as I stirred. A dull, pulsing pain at the back of my skull throbbed in time with the beeping from the nearby monitor. I turned my head slightly and winced. My muscles didn't feel like mine yet. I blinked once. Then again. A hospital. I was in a hospital. Panic rose in my chest like bile. I didn't know why yet, but something inside me screamed that I needed to move. To run. That I wasn't safe. But then I heard his voice. Lena. It was soft. Rehearsed. My eyes moved toward the sound. And there he stood, Adrien Vale. Dressed in a perfectly pressed coat. The corners of his mouth tugged upward in an expression that mimicked concern. His eyes scanned my face with a carefully measured look, like he was searching for something. Or hiding something. My chest tightened. Next to him stood another figure. Taller, leaner, quieter. His presence was more shadow than man, but I knew the shape of his silhouette before I even saw his face. Caleb Hart. I froze. My mind flared with emotion I couldn't name yet, but my body recognized him. Even without a word. Even when he refused to look directly at me. His posture was tense, like every bone in his body was clenched around a thought he couldn't speak aloud. Lena, do you remember what happened? Adrien asked gently, stepping forward. I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure what I was supposed to remember. Or at least not yet. What I did know was this. Something was wrong. Adrien glanced at Caleb, then turned back to me with a softened tone. You were in an accident. You hit your head. You've been unconscious for a few days. I blinked, slowly, pretending to process. You might be feeling a bit disoriented. The doctor said it's possible you've lost some short-term memory. He gestured toward Caleb. This is Caleb Hart. Your boyfriend. My gaze snapped toward Caleb. Boyfriend? Caleb's features didn't shift. His eyes remained carefully lowered, but I saw the twitch in his jaw. His lips parted slightly, then closed again. Silent. Controlled. Adrien continued. And I'm Adrien. Your brother. Well, foster brother. We grew up together. His words were warm. Familiar. Reassuring even. But every syllable was dipped in the syrup of manipulation. It was too smooth. Too polished. It took everything in me not to recoil. I blinked again and looked back at Caleb. His shoulders were squared, but his eyes, the brief glance I caught, looked almost mournful. Like he didn't agree with the words being spoken around him, but didn't have the right to correct them. I didn't know what was happening yet, not completely, but I knew two things with certainty. Adrien Vale was lying. And Caleb Hart wasn't playing along. The silence between us stretched, tight as a piano wire. I wet my lips and reached for the hem of the blanket, pretending to fidget while I thought. My fingers were trembling. Not from fear, not exactly. From restraint. As I did remember. Not just the accident. Not just the people in the room. I remembered everything. The months. The years. The betrayal. The way Adrien had wrapped his twisted obsession in sibling affection. The way I had loved him, helplessly, blindly, and how he had used that love to destroy me. But this time I would not fall for it. I glanced up at him again, letting my lower lip tremble just enough to appear fragile. I remember, I whispered. Adrien's brow twitched. What do you remember? He asked slowly, his tone tightening like a leash being yanked. I turned my eyes back to Caleb and let my voice shake. I remember him. Adrien's face paled. Caleb's shoulders stiffened. His eyes finally lifted to meet mine, and something unspoken passed between us. Just a flicker. Just a second. But I saw the shock. The confusion. And buried underneath that, something tender. My pulse thundered in my ears. I didn't wait for Adrien to interrupt. Instead, I slowly reached out toward Caleb, my fingers curling in the air, shaky and unsure. Can you hold me? Caleb flinched slightly like the request startled him. But then he moved. He stepped forward, his hand brushing mine as he reached for the railing. He paused just long enough to glance at Adrien, whose expression was now unreadable. Caleb leaned down, his touch hesitant like he was unsure if it was really okay. "It's okay," I whispered, voice trembling just the right amount. "Please." He didn't say a word. But he held me. His arms wrapped around me with a kind of gentleness that made something twist in my stomach. I rested my head against his chest, letting his warmth ground me. Letting Adrien watch every second of it. The tension in the room shifted. Adrien let out a brittle laugh, but it sounded hollow. He moved to the side table and picked up a glass of water. Then with a sharp crack, it shattered in his hand. Glass hit the floor. Water spilled. Blood smeared across his palm from where the shards had sliced his skin. He stared at the mess like he didn't know how it had happened. I turned my face slightly and whispered to Caleb, just loud enough for Adrien to hear, "I don't want him near me." Caleb nodded. His grip tightened slightly around my shoulders. Adrien stepped forward, ignoring the blood on his hand. "Lena, you don't mean that. You're confused. The accident." I looked at him, then really looked. And I saw it, the cracks behind the charm. The fury behind the concern. The obsession still trying to wear a mask. "I'm not confused," I said calmly. The room went still. A nurse knocked on the door. "Everything all right in here?" Caleb stood fully, putting himself between me and Adrien. "There's broken glass," he said, voice cool. "Can we have someone clean it?" Adrien opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else. But I turned my face away, dismissing him completely. I was cleared to leave the next morning. Physically I was fine. Minor head trauma. A few bruises. The doctors gave me pamphlets about rest and hydration and when to take the painkillers. Emotionally, no one knew that I had already survived the worst kind of injury. Adrien hovered in the hallway as I dressed. Caleb waited just outside the door, his posture rigid. When I stepped out, Adrien reached for my arm. "Come home," he said gently. "We'll take care of you. Everything will be." I pulled my arm away before he could finish. "I already said," I replied, "I'm going with my boyfriend." Caleb blinked, his eyes flickering toward me in surprise. But he didn't question it. He simply reached for my bag and slung it over his shoulder without a word. Adrien's jaw tightened. "You better not regret this, Lena," he said, his voice low. I paused. And met his eyes. "The only thing I regret," I said slowly, "is trusting you in the first place." Then I turned my back on him and walked down the hallway with Caleb at my side. I didn't look back. The night after I left the hospital, I didn't sleep. Caleb had insisted on giving me the master bedroom. Said it was quieter, sunnier in the morning, better for rest. He'd even placed a small diffuser on the bedside table with jasmine oil, my favorite scent. But even the familiar fragrance couldn't anchor me. Because every time I closed my eyes, I wasn't in that room. I was in a cold white hallway. Wearing a paper gown. Sitting on a steel-framed bed that never softened. And I was screaming. Not aloud. Not anymore. I had stopped screaming when I realized no one was coming. When Adrien stopped visiting altogether. When even the orderlies looked at me with eyes that said, "You deserve this." It had started the same day I confessed. 5 years ago in my past life, I had pressed my lips against Adrien's. Clumsy. Drunk. Desperate. I thought we shared something too complicated for names, something that defied bloodlines and labels. But instead of hesitation or understanding, he had recoiled like I was diseased. "Lena," he'd said, wiping his mouth like I had contaminated him. "That's disgusting. You're my sister." I wasn't. Not by blood. Not by choice. But I had believed him when he said we were family. And in my loneliness, I had made the mistake of hoping we could be something more. Adrien didn't stop at rejection. He told our foster parents I was unstable. That I was hallucinating. That I claimed we were lovers and had fabricated stories. He took me to the hospital for treatment. And he never let me leave. It didn't happen all at once. The first week I waited. Assumed it was a misunderstanding. I sat in the group therapy sessions. Took the pills without question. I told the doctor I was fine. But no one listened. Adrien came once a week. Never more than 15 minutes. Always with that polished smile, pretending he was my savior. "She's still confused," he would say. "It's tragic really. She used to be so bright." And I would scream. I would cry. Tell them the truth. I begged. Adrien, please. I didn't imagine it. You kissed me back. You said you loved me. He would look at the doctors and sigh, shaking his head sadly. Delusions, he'd whisper. She makes these stories up for attention. Eventually the staff stopped treating me like a person. They increased my meds. Started watching me when I slept. When I bathed. When I ate. I lost months that way. The last time I saw him, in that lifetime, I could barely speak. I was curled on the floor, my arms too weak to lift. The bruises from a nurse's rubber baton still fresh across my back. Please, I croaked. Adrien, let me out. I was wrong. I won't love you anymore. I swear. Just let me go. He crouched beside me, smiling. Oh, Lena, he said with mock tenderness. You're losing your mind again. And then he left. The final weeks of that life were a blur. My body gave up before my will did. I stopped eating. I stopped crying. Even sleep abandoned me. When the end came, it was quiet. No drama. No redemption. Just the slow slipping away of breath. But that wasn't the end. Because I remained. My body died. But my soul stayed behind. Not in the hospital. That place was too full of noise and pain. I drifted instead to the last place I remembered being happy. The small studio apartment I had rented with the stipend from college. The one with the yellow curtains and the tiny reading nook. The one no one bothered to clean out after my death. Dust settled slowly. My ghost followed it. I had thought no one would come. But then he arrived. I still remember the night he broke in. The building's security was cheap, but the lock on my door had been decent. I watched, stunned, as he hacked the code like he had done it before. He stumbled inside with wild eyes and dirt on his shoes, like he had run the whole way there. I stood in the corner of the room, invisible, intangible. My presence barely more than a shadow. He looked empty. Like someone had scooped out all his insides and left only skin and bone. He walked straight into my bedroom and collapsed on my bed. His hands curled around my pillow and he buried his face into it. He didn't speak. He sobbed. Gut-wrenching, soundless sobs that ripped through him like he was breaking apart cell by cell. I had never seen him cry in life. But now, as a ghost, I saw all of him. And for the first time I realized what I had never noticed before. He had loved me. He moved in a week later. Everyone said he was crazy. A man mourning a girl he had barely spoken to. A ghost chaser. A recluse. He talked to the air like someone was listening. He left cups of tea on the windowsill. He read aloud from the book he found under my bed. And he never slept in the center of the mattress. Always on one side, as if leaving space for someone who was no longer there. I sat beside him every night. I tried to touch him. I whispered his name. I stroked his hair with a hand he couldn't feel. I wanted to tell him I was sorry. For never seeing him. For choosing Adrien. For dying without ever looking back. Over time my spirit began to fade. The edges of the world blurred. My voice, even in the ether, grew quiet. I could no longer sit for long. I floated, weightless and aching. 3 years passed like that. And then, on the anniversary of my death, Caleb did something different. He turned on the TV before leaving that morning. News filled the screen. I hovered nearby, curious. That's when I saw the headline. Vale heir killed in suspected hit and run. My body went still. The suspect was unnamed, but I knew. I surged forward, mustering what little strength remained in my spirit, and tore through the invisible tether that had bound me to the apartment. The world rushed by in a blur of light and wind. Until I landed, softly, silently, at the foot of my grave. And there he was. Caleb Hart. Kneeling in front of my headstone, his hands shaking as he dropped a pile of empty pill bottles beside it. His eyes were red. His lips cracked. His face ashen. I did it, he whispered. I finally avenged you. He laid down a bouquet of orange roses, the only kind I'd ever liked, and pulled a flask from his coat. Then slowly he lifted his wrist. The scars were already there. Fresh ones waiting to join the old. No. I screamed, my voice ripping through the air like a hurricane. Caleb, don't. You can't. But he couldn't hear me. Until his head lifted. His eyes flicked to where I hovered, transparent, barely a shimmer in the summer air. He stared straight through me. And smiled. You came, he whispered. You really came for me. He closed his eyes. "I'll be brave in the next life," he said, pressing the blade against his skin. "I'll hold your hand next time." Then everything went black. And now I was here. Alive again. Reborn. Lying in the guest room of Caleb Hart's apartment. The real, flesh and blood Caleb, breathing warm, asleep in the living room. And me, lying awake in the dark. Second chance. One I didn't deserve. But one I would not waste. The first morning I woke up in Caleb's home, the light pouring through the curtains didn't feel like prison bars. It was soft. Warm. A strange sensation, really, waking up without panic in my chest or a camera in the corner of the ceiling. The mattress beneath me felt too plush. The scent in the room was something floral, clean, expensive. The faint hum of the air purifier, the ticking clock on the wall, even the way the sheets were folded, all of it was so normal it made me uneasy. I sat up slowly, brushing my hair out of my face, only to find a tray beside the bed. Warm toast, scrambled eggs, a tiny jar of honey, and a single orange rose in a thin ceramic vase. My breath caught. I hadn't told anyone about the orange roses. Ever. The apartment was silent, but the air felt lived in. Not like a place staged for guests, but something used, kept, remembered. I padded out barefoot, my steps careful against the hardwood. Caleb was in the kitchen, back turned, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was stirring something in a pot with the kind of concentration that made me want to interrupt him just to see how he'd react. He looked over his shoulder before I could announce myself. His eyes flicked from my face to the tray in my hands. "You didn't have to," I said quietly. "I know." He wiped his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. "I wanted to." A pause hung between us. He didn't ask how I slept. He didn't press. Instead he tilted his head slightly. "You should sit. You're still healing." "I'm not made of glass," I muttered, but I sat anyway. He made me tea. Jasmine. Of course. I stared into the cup, watching the leaves bloom in the water like ghosts from another life. I should have asked him then, "How do you know? Why do you know?" But I didn't. Because I wasn't ready to hear the answer. After breakfast, I wandered into the guest room's closet. It wasn't empty. In fact, it was filled. Carefully arranged rows of loungewear, sundresses, cozy cardigans, and soft cotton tops, all in colors I favored. Pinks, creams, earth tones. There were even a few slippers lined up by the baseboard. I touched one of the tags still hanging from a sleeve. Brand new. I turned slowly and called out, "Caleb?" A beat. Then his voice drifted down the hallway. "Yeah." I stepped into the doorway. "This stuff, it wasn't just for convenience, was it?" He hesitated in the kitchen. "What do you mean?" I raised an eyebrow. "Half your guest room is stocked like a boutique. My size. In my style." He scratched the back of his neck, the first real crack in his calm. "I saw some of it while shopping. Thought, maybe if you ever came by." He didn't finish. "I ever came by." He'd been waiting for something that, in his mind, probably never made sense to expect. I let the silence stretch. Then said softly, "You bought it just in case." Caleb's ears turned red. "Yeah." Later that day I asked to go to a home decor store. His brows lifted. "You're not really supposed to be out and about yet." "I'm not dead," I replied lightly. "And I want to pick out a few things." His hesitation lasted only a few seconds before he grabbed his keys. The ride was quiet. Comfortable. At the store I chose soft touches. Throw pillows with patterns, pastel bed sheets, tiny indoor plants. Plush bunnies for the bed. A framed quote that read, "You are your own home." Caleb followed behind with the cart, never questioning any of it. Not even when I picked out matching bunny slippers in our sizes. Back at his apartment. No, our apartment now, I decided. He hovered awkwardly as I replaced his clinical gray throw blanket with a pale pink one. He raised an eyebrow. "Pink." I shrugged. "You're the one who invited me to stay." He muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like, "I'll buy blackout curtains." Over the next few days the space changed. His once minimalist living room began to resemble something lived in and warm. I placed plush toys on the couch. Replaced the scentless candles with sweet-smelling ones. Filled the bathroom with face masks and peach-scented soap. He protested once. Just once. "I think I just lost all claim to this space." "Good," I replied, tossing him a set of couple pajamas. "That's the idea." He held them up. Blue and white stripes. His and hers. He didn't argue again. At night we didn't talk much. I slept in the guest room. He stayed out of it. We shared meals, occasional banter, and a rhythm that began forming around the edges of something that neither of us dared name yet. And yet sometimes I'd find his gaze lingering too long. And sometimes mine did too. One evening I caught him on the couch holding one of the bunny plushies I'd placed on the armrest. He was absent-mindedly squeezing it. I smirked. Childish, isn't it? He looked up startled, then shook his head. I didn't say that. But you thought it. He tossed it onto the couch. It's just a little different. Uncomfortable. He met my eyes, something flickering in his. No. Not uncomfortable. Just unfamiliar. One morning I stepped out of the shower to find a ceramic toothbrush holder on the counter. 2 cartoon figures, one boy, one girl, their heads tilted together in an affectionate pose. There was no note. No explanation. But I smiled. I placed my toothbrush next to his. Just like that, we had a toothbrush holder for 2. At some point it hit me how different this was from what I'd once known. Adrien's love, if you could even call it that, had been all-encompassing. Overbearing. The kind that gave just enough warmth to keep me tethered, and just enough cruelty to ensure I stayed in place. He never let me pick my own furniture. Or clothes. Or music. My preferences were accessories he borrowed when convenient. But Caleb never took. He offered. He waited. He let me choose. One night as I walked past the living room I saw the hallway lights still on and paused. Caleb was seated on the couch, a blanket draped around his shoulders, sipping tea from a chipped ceramic mug. His hair was mussed from the shower and he wore those couple pajamas, the ones with tiny sheep on them. He looked up. Can't sleep? He asked. I shook my head. Too quiet. He scooted over, patting the space beside him. Want to watch something dumb? I hesitated, then nodded. We watched 2 episodes of a mindless cooking show. The kind where nothing bad ever happened. Just steam and sugar and bread rising. Somewhere in the middle of the 3rd episode I felt my head drift onto his shoulder. He didn't move. Not an inch. His breathing was steady. Warm. And for the first time in both my lives, I didn't feel like I owed anything in return for safety. It started with a knock. Not the uncertain kind. Not the hesitant taps of a delivery driver or neighbor. No, this knock was confident. Familiar. 3 sharp raps, spaced with intention. I froze mid-step in the hallway, laundry basket still in my hands. Caleb looked up from the kitchen, eyes narrowing instantly. The second knock came before either of us moved. He set his cup down, wiped his hands on a dish towel and strode toward the door. Wait, I said, but it was too late. He opened it. And there he was. Adrien Vale. Leaning against the frame like he owned the place, sunglasses perched on his head, smile like a wolf wearing silk. He wore a deep navy coat and that ever-present aura of self-assurance, but it cracked the second he saw me. Lena, he said breathless. You look. His eyes flicked down my body. An oversized cardigan, soft slippers, one sock half off. Not the composed version of me he was used to seeing. Not the girl he could keep in a glass box. Well, he finished. Caleb didn't move. Didn't step back. Didn't speak. Adrien didn't acknowledge him either. He stepped forward. Can we talk? I placed the laundry basket on the floor. We are talking, I said flatly. Alarms were ringing in my head, but I kept my tone calm. Collected. This was a trap, not the kind with bars and locks but with sentiment and guilt. He tilted his head. I've been worried. You left the hospital without saying anything. I was cleared to leave. Still, he said, stepping closer. You've always been impulsive when you're overwhelmed. There it is. The subtle implication. The start of the gaslighting. I felt it like a punch to the stomach. The beginning of the same manipulation that had landed me in that hospital in the last life. I forced a smile. I'm not overwhelmed. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small prescription bottle. The doctor said you might feel disoriented. These could help. Just until things feel familiar again. He held it out like an offering. Caleb's arm shot out in front of me before I could react. His voice was low and steel-edged. Put that away. Adrien blinked, thrown off for a moment. I wasn't talking to you. Caleb took a step forward. And I'm not asking. The air shifted. I'd never seen Caleb like this. Not quiet. Not guarded. This version of him stood with his full height, gaze cold, fists clenched at his sides like he was moments from snapping. Adrien narrowed his eyes. You're awfully protective for someone who didn't even know she was your girlfriend until a few days ago. A muscle ticked in Caleb's jaw. You made that up. To confuse her. Again. Adrien scoffed. You're playing hero now? That's cute. He turned to me. Lena, don't you think this is all a bit fast? Moving in. Decorating. I mean, are you sure you're thinking clearly? Are you trying to gaslight her again? Caleb asked sharply. Because that won't work this time. Adrien's mask slipped, just for a breath. The charming expression twisted ever so slightly. I'm concerned, he said. No, I said. You're controlling. His gaze snapped to me. I didn't flinch. You're not here because you care. You're here because I stopped needing you. Adrien looked at Caleb again. You don't know what you're doing. She needs stability. She has it, Caleb growled. Just not from you. Adrien's hand twitched. I stepped forward. I don't want your prescriptions. I don't want your help. And I don't want to be anywhere near you. Lena. Leave. His nostrils flared. This isn't over. Caleb stepped between us again. Yes. It is. And then calmly, firmly, he shut the door in Adrien's face. We stood there for a long moment. Silence pulsed around us. Caleb's hands were still clenched. I reached for one gently, prying his fingers open. His skin was warm. Too warm. You okay? I asked quietly. He swallowed hard, eyes still fixed on the door. He was going to do it again, wasn't he? Yes, I whispered. But not this time. He looked down at me, then truly looked. Next time, he said softly, don't answer the door. I smiled faintly. Next time I'll let you punch him. His lips twitched. Tempting. That night I couldn't sleep. I stood on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the city lights. The air was cool. The kind of chill that makes you remember you're alive. Behind me I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps. He didn't speak. Just came to stand beside me, close enough for our shoulders to touch. He scares me, I said finally. Caleb's voice was quiet. Me too. I turned to him. But you didn't back down. I won't, he said. And I believed him. In my past life no one had stood up for me. Not the doctors. Not my so-called family. Not even myself. But this time there was someone beside me. Not speaking for me, standing with me. That made all the difference. I reached down, lacing my fingers with his. He tensed just for a second, then squeezed back. We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to. I never thought I'd get attached to a pair of bunny slippers. But there I was, standing in the kitchen wearing a faded oversized sweatshirt and fuzzy pink ears on my feet, sipping jasmine tea while Caleb folded dish towels with quiet precision. And for once I wasn't waiting for the floor to disappear beneath me. This was real. We had settled into a rhythm. Mornings started with tea and scrambled eggs. Afternoons were filled with music and light from the windows I kept forgetting to close. I'd taken over the bookshelf. Caleb had pretended to be annoyed, but I caught him reading one of my romance novels 2 nights ago. The apartment was transforming, not all at once but in a slow, beautiful way. Gone was the cold minimalism. In its place, soft lights, fresh flowers, scatterings of color. My clothes hung beside his in the closet. My shampoo sat next to his on the shower shelf. Felt like mine. No, ours. It was Caleb who suggested we get a pet. We were sitting on the balcony that evening, watching the sun sink low behind the buildings. He was chewing on a popsicle stick, something he did when he was thinking too much, and I was curled up in a blanket, scrolling through a home decor app. Want to get a cat? He asked without looking at me. I paused. What? A cat. Or a dog. Or something that sheds and ruins furniture. I turned to study him. You don't even like animals. He shrugged. You do. 1,000 emotions welled up behind my ribs. The offer seemed so simple, almost silly. But it landed with the weight of something much bigger. No, I said quietly. His head snapped toward me, surprised. I hesitated, then set my phone down. I've never had one. You've always wanted one. The way he said it, not asked, said, made my breath catch. He knew. Or maybe he remembered. Or maybe he just saw me more clearly than anyone ever had. I nodded slowly. When I was 17, I begged Adrien to get me a kitten. Caleb stilled. I rarely talked about Adrien, not in detail, not with anyone. But this time I didn't stop myself. I saw her outside our foster home. Tiny thing. Black fur. White paws. She followed me home every day. I told Adrien about her, and one day, he actually brought her inside. I smiled faintly, but it faded quickly. But his mother found out. He said I was corrupting him. Making him soft. He screamed. Called me manipulative. Said I was trying to ruin his future. Caleb didn't say a word. Just listened. She took the kitten away. I don't know where. I wasn't even allowed to say goodbye. And then, she locked me in the storage room for a week. My voice cracked then, just slightly, like a worn-out hinge. I was afraid of the dark back then, I whispered. I remember, Caleb said softly. The words hit harder than they should have. I looked up, but he wasn't staring at me. His gaze was distant, jaw tight, hands clasped together in his lap. He wasn't just sympathizing. He was remembering. We didn't speak for a few minutes after that. The silence was gentle, not strained. Then he got up, walked into the apartment, and came back with his laptop. He opened it, clicked a few tabs, and turned the screen toward me. Adoption center listings. Pick one, he said simply. My eyes blurred for a moment. I blinked quickly and tried to smile. You sure? I want you to have something that's yours. His voice was quiet. Something that no one can take away. We spent the next hour clicking through profiles. We argued over names, debated breeds, laughed at bios that called kittens chaotic gremlins with attitude. At some point my head ended up on his shoulder. He didn't seem to mind. By the time the sun fully disappeared, we had chosen her. A tiny gray tabby with uneven ears and a penchant for climbing into cabinets. The first time she walked into the apartment, she jumped straight into my lap like she belonged there. Caleb tried to act aloof, but 3 days later, I caught him cradling her in his arms like a baby, talking to her about stock prices. He denied it. I had video proof. We began to feel like a unit, not two people coexisting but a home. Cooking together turned chaotic fast. Caleb couldn't dice onions without crying, and I couldn't stop burning garlic. We learned to laugh through it. He started letting me pick the music in the mornings, until he realized I had a weakness for 2000s boy bands. He threatened to move out. I turned up the volume. On one particular Saturday, we spent the whole day reorganizing the apartment. I arranged the bookshelf by color. He disapproved loudly. You know it makes no sense, right? He grumbled, tossing a copy of The Great Gatsby onto the blue shelf. It's aesthetic, I said smugly. It's a war crime, he muttered. I flicked his forehead. He tackled me onto the couch. We stayed there a long time. That night I found him outside on the rooftop, quietly planting flowers. Rows of orange roses. You're planting these? I asked, startled. He looked up, a little sheepish. I wanted them to be blooming by spring. I thought you didn't care about aesthetics. I care about what makes you smile, he replied and went back to digging. I stood there for a moment, stunned. Then I walked over and dropped to my knees beside him. You're full of surprises. He shrugged. Only the good kind, I hope. I looked down at the soft soil, then up at him. You're nothing like him, I said. Caleb froze. I know, he replied so softly I almost missed it. He turned to me then, eyes steady, expression unreadable. I'm not here to replace your pain, Lena. Or fix it. I just want you to know it's okay to heal. My throat closed. I leaned over and kissed his cheek. Not a bold kiss. Not a desperate one. Just quiet. Grateful. He didn't move. Didn't speak. But I saw the way his hands trembled just slightly in the dirt. The invitation arrived in the form of a white envelope slipped under the door. No sender. Just my name written in familiar, careful script. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Caleb hovered nearby, arms crossed, brows drawn tight. You think it's from him? He asked. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Inside was a short message. A family meeting has been arranged at the Vale estate. We want what's best for you. Come home, Lena. Let's fix this. Mother. I hadn't called her that in years. Not since the day she threw out the kitten. Not since the day she locked me away for corrupting her precious heir. Caleb took the letter from my hand, reread it, then glanced at me. It's a setup. I nodded. They want to scare me back under their control. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, are you going? Yes. Alone. I looked up at him. No. But I need them to think I am. The Vale estate hadn't changed. Tall iron gates. White columns. A front lawn trimmed within an inch of its life. Everything still reeked of money and control. I walked up the steps, heart steady, voice rehearsed. Hidden inside my purse was a tiny recorder Caleb had tested 3 times before I left. Let them talk, he had said. Let them hang themselves. Adrien opened the door himself. He was dressed in all black. Too formal for a family discussion. His expression was neutral, but his eyes burned the moment he saw me. You came, he said. Where's your mother? I asked. She'll be down soon. He stepped aside. Let's talk in the sunroom. I followed him inside. The air was the same, too cold for summer, too still for comfort. I sat down on the velvet couch I used to be afraid to wrinkle. Adrien remained standing. You've changed, he said after a long pause. I tilted my head. You haven't. His lips curled. Lena, this is ridiculous. That boy, Caleb, he's not even one of us. You're wasting your time pretending you belong in his world. I crossed my legs slowly, deliberately. I don't belong in yours. You think he can protect you? From everything I've built? From what I know. Adrien's voice grew harder. You're still unstable. Still unpredictable. You proved that when you kissed me. I flinched. Not because the words hurt, but because he still thought he could use them against me. You kissed me back, I said quietly. His jaw tightened. You were a child playing pretend. You were a coward hiding behind the word brother. He took a step closer. You don't belong with him. I reached into my purse and pressed the recorder through the fabric, just enough to start saving every word. Adrien exhaled. Let me fix this. Tell the press you had a breakdown. Say Caleb manipulated you. Move back in. We'll take care of everything. Like you did before? I whispered. He moved even closer, now standing just inches from me. I was trying to protect you. No, I said. You were trying to own me. His hand twitched. I could have you committed again, he said, soft and vicious. One phone call. You'd disappear and no one would ask why. Try me, I replied. The room went silent. And then I smiled. Actually, go ahead. Call them. His brows furrowed. A loud knock sounded behind him. Then another. The door swung open without invitation. Caleb stepped in, fury etched across his face. He moved fast. Before Adrien could react, Caleb had pushed between us and shoved him back with one sharp motion. Touch her again, Caleb said through gritted teeth, and I'll make sure you never use your hands again. Adrien stumbled, stunned. Caleb turned to me. You got it. I nodded and pulled the recorder from my purse. Then deliberately I pressed play. Adrien's voice filled the room. You're still unstable. I could have you committed again. One phone call. The door opened again, this time with purpose. 2 security officers stepped in, followed by a private investigator Caleb had hired. One of them held a folder. Mr. Vale, the investigator said. We have recorded evidence of coercion and threat. We'll be taking this further. You'll need to come with us. Adrien spun toward me, his face twisting into something feral. You set me up, he hissed. No, I said. You did that all by yourself. They cuffed him gently, still giving him the illusion of dignity. But his face, the fear, the disbelief, shattered any pride he had left. As they escorted him out, I finally felt something I hadn't tasted in a long time. Freedom. We walked out of the estate into the blinding afternoon light. Caleb held my hand the whole way down the marble steps. You okay? He asked. I nodded, breath catching. That was the first time I didn't flinch. He looked at me. You were incredible, he said softly. I laughed a little shaky. I was terrified. You didn't show it. We reached the car. I turned to him, our hands still entwined. I'm still scared sometimes, I admitted. But I think I'm learning to breathe again. He opened the passenger door for me, waited as I slid in, then leaned down and said, Next time you forget how, I'll remind you. And he closed the door gently. It took less than 2 months for the Vale family to begin unraveling. The first to fall was the PR machine. The carefully polished statements, the discreet payoffs, the fake testimonies. Once the recording went public, no amount of spin could repaint Adrien's words. You're still unstable. I could have you committed again. The media had a field day. Then came the lawsuits. Former staff came forward with sealed documents. Victims of similar coercion. Financial manipulation. Silent partners who had long known but never dared speak. Until someone else did. The name Veil began to rot in headlines. The stock price dropped. Brand partnerships dissolved overnight. Clients withdrew. Their fortune hemorrhaged in front of the world. And behind it all, calm, silent, methodical, was Caleb. I didn't know at first. Not until I saw the headlines. Key Veil Holdings quietly acquired by private firm Hart and Lynn Associates. I stood at the kitchen table, phone in hand, rereading the article 3 times. Hart and Lynn. Caleb's company. I turned to where he was standing in front of the stove, flipping pancakes like it was any normal morning. You bought their land portfolio, I said. He didn't look up. Some of it. And their media assets? Just the ones that mattered. And the stake in Evergold Biotech? He finally turned around. I told you I'd protect you. You dismantled their empire. He set the plate down in front of me. No, he said calmly. I just gave it a little push. I stared at him, the quiet man I once thought was soft-spoken, passive, just a background presence in my life. Now the one holding the strings of everything they lost. He sat down beside me, pouring syrup over his pancakes like we weren't talking about destroying a dynasty. You okay? He asked. I blinked. Then nodded. I think I am. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from the facility. It was hand-delivered. No return address. Just my name. The handwriting was still his. Lena. Please. One last time. Just let me explain. Adrien. I almost threw it away. But some part of me, the part that needed to bury the past properly, didn't. The facility was tucked behind a row of hills, surrounded by thick trees and a white iron gate that looked more like a spa retreat than a rehabilitation center. But no amount of polished walls could erase what it was. A gilded cage. Adrien was waiting in one of the visiting rooms. When I entered, he looked up, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes I saw him without armor. No suit. No smirk. Just a gray sweater, pale skin, sunken eyes. He stood slowly. Lena. I didn't offer a greeting. He sat. So did I. There were no guards in the room. But a camera blinked quietly in the corner. You came, he said. I needed to see it for myself, I replied. What? That I'm ruined. His voice cracked. Is that what you wanted? I didn't want anything, I said. Except peace. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. You think I don't know I went too far? That I didn't make mistakes? I was scared, Lena. Terrified. Of what? Of you leaving, he said. Of the way I felt. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong. But you were the only thing that ever felt real. I stared at him. So you locked me away? I didn't know what else to do. His hands trembled now. You kissed me. And I wanted it. I wanted you. But I couldn't be that person. So I tried to erase it. To erase you. A beat of silence. Then I asked the only question I came for. Do you love me, Adrien? His eyes snapped to mine. Yes. I always have. I exhaled slowly. Then I feel sorry for you. He blinked, stunned. Because that wasn't love, I said. It was fear. Possession. Control. You didn't love me. You wanted to keep me where you could own me. He gripped the edge of the table. I lost everything because of you. No, I said, rising to my feet. You lost everything because of you. He stood too desperate. Lena, please. I stepped back. This is the last time we speak, I said. You don't get to have any more of me. And then I turned. I didn't look back. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. Like the final thread tying me to that version of myself had finally snapped. Caleb was waiting by the car. When I got in, I didn't say a word. He glanced at me. How was it? I smiled faintly. It's over. I had always imagined love would be loud. Maybe because Adrien's version of it had been. Doors slamming. Words shouted across long halls. Grand gestures masking manipulation. But the real thing? It was Sunday morning sunlight on the kitchen floor. It was Caleb standing by the stove, hair still messy from sleep, flipping pancakes in his old hoodie. It was Machi curled in my lap, purring like a tiny motorboat, while I sipped jasmine tea and read a romance novel I'd already read 5 times. It was peace. Soft. Ordinary. Unshakable. 6 months had passed since I walked away from Adrien Vale for the last time. 6 months since the last of the Vale fortune crumbled into dust and silence. Since then Caleb and I had carved out something quiet and strong. There were no dramatic declarations, no sweeping vows, just shared grocery lists and warm socks and toothbrushes beside each other. And I was no longer waiting for the sky to fall. I was living. Our home didn't look anything like the place I'd first stepped into. Gone was the minimalist gray furniture. In its place, a patchwork of color and personality. I had framed Polaroids on the bookshelf now. One of Caleb asleep with Machi on his chest. Another of us tangled in a blanket fort, holding mugs with whipped cream and grins too wide for our faces. The dining table was scattered with our latest hobby, painting flower pots. None of them matched. Most of them were hideous. I loved every one of them. One night Caleb made tomato soup from scratch. I burned the grilled cheese. He still called it perfect. We ate on the balcony under a string of fairy lights he'd installed the week before. The air smelled of fresh soil and rosewater. A soft breeze ruffled my hair. I used to hate balconies, I said softly, pulling my legs up to my chest. Caleb looked over. Why? They felt too open. Like the world could see me. He didn't respond right away. Just leaned back in his chair watching the sky change colors. You're allowed to be seen now, he said at last. No one's going to take that from you. I blinked hard. Then reached out and held his hand across the table. The proposal wasn't a surprise. There was no ring hidden in cake, no fireworks, no grand reveal. It happened on a Tuesday. We were on the rooftop, tending to the garden we'd built together, the one filled with the flowers I once thought I'd never see again. I was elbow deep in soil, laughing because Caleb had just realized he'd mixed up the labels and planted lavender where the carrots were supposed to go. He wiped dirt onto his jeans and looked over at me with that quiet, steady gaze I'd come to trust more than anything. Marry me, he said. Just like that. No theatrics. No fear. Just truth. I stared at him, heart full and strangely calm. Then I smiled. Yes. We didn't tell anyone right away. It wasn't about announcements or celebration. It was about planting something that would last. Later that night I found a tiny velvet box on the windowsill. Inside was a simple gold ring, no diamond. Just a band, smooth and warm and steady. Like him. I slipped it on and whispered to the dark, "Thank you." Sometimes I still wake up from dreams where I'm trapped in white hospital walls, where Adrien's voice echoes like a judge behind glass. But now when I sit up in bed gasping, there's always a hand reaching out for me. A sleepy voice murmuring, "You're safe." And I believe it. Every time. Machi climbed into our bed that night, wriggled between us like she owned the world. Caleb groaned. "She's a tyrant. She's our tyrant." He kissed the top of my head. Our everything. We didn't live perfectly ever after. We still burned dinner. Still argued about laundry. Still tripped over cat toys. But we were real. And we were whole. For the first time in both my lives. I was home. The end.